Morning. Hope everybody's well. Last time we learned Machlokes Amoraim. If you've got schach posel across the middle of the entire sukkah, then everybody agrees it is posel under a certain measure. Machlokes is how much. One man says 4 tvachim, one man says 4 amos. Again, so if you've got either 4 tvachim or 4 amos across the middle of the entire sukkah, it is posel. The Gemara is now trying to prove one way or another. We're up to Yud Zayin and Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Toshema. If you put boards made out of cedar wood across the schach of the sukkah, that has 4 tfachim to each board, and that's the only thing you used. Everybody agrees it's possible. As we said, boards are no good. It looks too much like a normal roof. If they're less than 4, more apostles. Rabbi Yehuda says it's kosher if it's less than 4. Top of Yud Ches Mud Aleph. That if between each board there's the width of another board, psal, as we said many times already, means schach. You put schach between them, it is kosher. That either one is 4 amos, we're talking about we're using wooden boards. Each board is 4 tvachim wide. And we're saying it is kosher because only 50% of the schach. So if you hold that, everybody agrees that it has to be 4 amos middle to become possible, that's okay. Because at the end of the day, you've only got 4 tvachim. That if you hold that anything which is 4 tvachim, if it's schach possible that goes across the entire sukkah, it's possible, then why is it kosher? Each board is schach posel. You've got a board which is 4 tvachim wide and it's going across the entire sukkah, so it should be posel. The fact you've got a 50% schach kosher, how is it going to help you? We're talking about a sukkah that has exactly 8 amos. You put a board and kosher schach, a board and kosher schach, a board and kosher schach on one side. And then and you put a board and kosher schach, a board and kosher schach from the other side. If you work it out, it will come out to exactly 8 tvachim in the middle of kosher schach. And then you've got a kosher sukkah in the middle. And since you've got a kosher sukkah in the middle, so therefore it is kosher. So that is what the Gemara says over here. And we're talking about a specific circumstances. I want to show the picture over here. That we're talking about where you've got the specific circumstances where you've got schach posel with schach kosher. And since it's exactly, we're talking about when you've got exactly 4, and at the end you came out to the right, to 8 tvachim in the middle, that's why it is kosher. Here to show a picture of it. It's good to see the picture. They'll not put it on the right page. Right. Oh. Yeah. You can see this picture. We're at the top left picture. What they've done is you've got 4 tvachim schach posel, 4 tvachim kosher, 4 tvachim posel, 4 tvachim kosher. The middle is 8 tvachim schach kosher. That middle of the sukkah is kosher. Why? Because you've got different akuma from each side, it's less than 4 amos, and the middle is 8 tvachim schach kosher. So therefore, you've got a kosher sukkah because of the middle, not because the 4 tvachim by itself make it kosher. You've got 8 tvachim together that makes it kosher. Okay. Omar Bai. You've got a big sukkah. You've got 3 tvachim of airspace in the middle, so that would be possible because 3 tvachim of airspace splits the sukkah in half, and it's no good. But you put in between the air, either canes, which is kosher, maybe shvutin or metal spits, have a mute, it is kosher. This is a fascinating halacha which we pass like, and it comes out a nice riddle that when would you have using schach posel to make your sukkah kosher? How? You got a kosher sukkah, massive kosher sukkah, but in the middle of the sukkah you've got 3 tvachim of air. 3 tvachim of air splits the sukkah in half. Since the sukkah is in half and half, you've got no kosher sukkah. But what you do is you put inside that 3 tvachim of air some, let's say, a metal ladder or anything which is possible for schach. So what happens is like this. Once you put something in the middle, So you've got lovud. So you've got no more 3 tvachim of airspace. And the majority of the sukkah is chach kosher. So therefore, the fact that you've used chach posel to take away the problem of airspace makes it kosher. But the sukkah ketano, if it's a very small sukkah, only 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim, then bekonim, if you use canes, have a miut. B'shvudim with metal spits, have a miut. Why? Because now you don't have 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim chach kosher. But in that side, if it's in the middle of the sukkah, there's a shitta that if you've got one airspace going all the way down the middle, even if it's not 3 tvachim wide, the whole sukkah becomes possible. Tesis points out that it doesn't mean a tiny, tiny airspace. He says like this. He says we're talking about a situation where you've actually created that. It's not like many times you've got a sukkah which has got lots of air spaces. You're supposed to have a bit of air spaces. But we're talking about where you've got across the entire sukkah airspace without a single bit of schach inside it. What's possible? It says, what's the spot that we do say love in the middle of the time? We're going to compare chasukkah to chastumah v'tahara, which we've done before, and we're going to do again many times. So this is talking about elchas eivin. Later we're going to compare it to tumah. Let me just show the picture. It's very straightforward. We're talking about the halachas of Eivin. One of the halachas of Eivin is the end of the mob, you have to have a beam. Here you put the beam, but it didn't go all the way across. It's got a space. Alternatively, you did 2 beams, and the 2 beams just don't reach each other. If you look at the picture over here, you've got 2 beams that just don't reach each other. So both times you've got a beam going across, either one beam is going across, it doesn't reach the other end, or 2 beams that don't reach each other. So the halacha is like this. A curse because 7 kabels curse racha. The chin stay curse. Achat sets because 7 achat sets because racha. 2 beams each coming out from one wall. When the nuggets don't touch each other, they don't touch each other. Pochet mishloish and stuff like that. Less than 3 tvachim. You don't need to bring another board. Why? Another beam. Why? Because we say they're touching because of novel. Shloish stuff like that. You have to bring another beam. Eidoch shani curse do abonon. It's only do abonon by even we'll make it to this double love in the mensa. So even if you've got a beam going here, it stops over here. Since it's less than 3 tvachim apart, so if we say lovud, but by Hilchas Sukkah, who says we say such a thing? The Eidoch says the word the man doma. Again, my time shall the curse do abonon. It's only do abonon. Since only do abonon, we'll make. My time the man doma lovud be'emsa. What's the sword? Man doma says we don't say lovud in the middle. The Tana Ruba Shiva Beis. If you've got what's called a window in the roof, a window which goes straight upwards into the skylight. And it's got the size of a tefach. Now this Mishnah splits the halachas if it's got a side, if the skylight is a tefach big, or if it's not a tefach big. And as Rashi points out, the halachas are exactly the same. The reason the Mishnah splits it in half is only because there are differences regarding other halachas, but regarding these halachas, there's no difference. The halach is tumah b'bayis. If there's tumah in the house, kulei tomei, everything in the house is tomei, because at the end of the day, there's still a roof. Mash connected aruba was underneath the skylight toy because it's got all the way to the sky. There's no roof. Tumah connected aruba. If this tumah is opposite the skylight, kolabayis kulei toy. If you've got a big skylight and you've got a skylight, you've got tumah underneath the skylight. So if we don't say the house has a roof to it, because we say the skylight makes the tumah escape. If the skylight doesn't have a tefach, tumah b'bayis connected aruba toy. Opposite the skylight is toy. Tumah connected aruba kolabayis kulei toy. The whole house is toy. So we see clearly that if you've got a skylight, which is less than 3 tvachim, tumah can escape. Now, if you hold of lovut, that what happens is the tumah joins up together, that the walls join up together. So then what the tumah shouldn't escape, the tumah should stay in the house. And after we say it's toy, it's a raya that we don't say lovut in the middle of the room. Elchas tumah is different. This is how we were taught them, that we don't say lovut the gabe elchas tumah. We have other things we do say they lovud. So we've got machlokas, do we say lovud in the middle of a sukkah when we've got a small amount of airspace. We pass can unless it's 3 tvachim of airspace, okay. Now the Gemara is going to tell us a few people that said the halacha, but did not explain themselves so well, and the Gemara says I have to explain it better. A house that fell in this we put schach on top kshero. Very Polish, you've got to explain. Kach pirish abba was psula, because abba was kshero. You can't just say that if a house fell in, you put on schach, it's kosher. You have to explain It's only because you're relying on different akuma, but different akuma only lasts for 4 amas. So you have to explain only up to 4 amas and not more. A bruma is the name of a fish. And this fish would grow in a place where there was a lot of worms. But this particular fish, he said, is permitted. Very posh, you've got to explain. But this is what my father said. Shamokim praying in such a place as Surah. Shamokim praying motels. Different fish in different places are more likely to be infested or not. And this is actually a lot which is doing again nowadays. Dates in Eretz Yisrael are so infested that people don't bother eating them. In England, you can check them. So what happens is different foods in different places have different levels of infestation. So how can you say that this fish is kosher? It depends where it comes from. There was a river called Bav, and there was a fish inside it called Sachnosa. And that fish, Rabbi said, Shiur is permitted. So my time, what's the reason? There's a strong current. Since a tome fish of that kind has no spine, to be able to go swim against the current, the person has to have a spine. He has to have a certain amount of strength. Now, this fish obviously doesn't have it. So the tome fish doesn't. So if you see the fish in that river, and therefore it must be that that's a kosher fish. We see that some fish do manage to go up it. Anyway, the water is very, very salty. Since it has no fins, so it has no scales, a fish that has no scales gets affected by the salt water. And therefore it must be that it has scales. If it must have scales, it must be a kosher fish. We see that some fish without scales survive in that environment, even with all the salt. And we should do the mud of that river has no bad insects inside it, and there are no tray for fish. So therefore, in that particular river, you can be safe. Now things have changed. Two other rivers have started flowing into this river, into the river called Bav. Now that they started flowing into it, so other tray for fish get pulled along inside it. So no longer can you rely that this fish is kosher. Okay. This is the whole sugya, and it's kedai to get the picture very clear. So put up the picture. But this is a shaila regarding pitiko yurid v'seisa. So here you've got a picture. I'll show the picture first, and then we'll discuss what the picture is. This is the picture. You've got a courtyard. It's got balconies all around. If you're looking, you see balconies all around. Underneath the balconies, these posts. These posts are to support the balcony, right? You've got balconies coming out of the houses all the way around, and they have posts underneath the balconies. On top, across the balconies, you put boards, slats of wood, and you put schach. So now, if there would be less than 4 amas from the walls of the courtyard, of course it would be kosher because of different akuma. That's the exact case of our Mishnah. But we're talking about a case where it's more than 4 amas. We also talk about another case, this case, where it's got no posts. If you look at this picture over here, the same as the picture before. The difference is it has no posts to support the balconies. So again, I'll try now to describe it with words for those who find the picture difficult to understand. You've got a courtyard, houses all the way around, like a ches shape, all around the courtyard. There's houses. So you've got walls. Then you've got balconies coming off the houses. Now a person puts chach across the balconies and he wants to sit underneath. Now there are 2 cases. One where the balconies have posts underneath. One where the balconies does not have posts. Says the Gemara. If it has posts, everybody agrees it's kosher. Why? What's the svar if it's got posts kosher? The answer is because of Lovod. Lovod dictates that since there are posts less than 3 tvachim apart from each other, so therefore what happens is that posts create a Lovod. It's as if you've got a wall around, so you've got kosher sukkah. But if you've got no posts, it's a machlokes Rabbi and Rabbi. You must remember again, if there's less than 4 amas from the walls to the middle of the courtyard, everybody would agree it's kosher, because at the end of the day, then you've got different akuma. We're discussing a situation where you do not have different akuma because there's more than 4 amas from the walls to the schach. So this is the Bachlik. Top of Yud Chesed Beis, Ominon, Pitiko Yod V'Sosim. The end of the wall goes down. That means the balconies themselves have a tefach of thickness to the floor of the balcony. That tefach of thickness is a tefach going from the sky downwards to the earth. We look at this tefach as if it's the beginning of a wall, and we imagine as if the wall is going down all the way to the floor, and that is the three walls you've got around the sukkah. Let's try and show the picture over here. If you look very, very carefully, there's the balcony. On the balcony, there's a tefach of height, tiny, like 5-10 centimeters of height, to the wall of the balcony. That means the floor of the balcony is a tefach thick. We look at it as if the beginning of a wall. Beginning of the wall, we imagine as if it stretches all the way to the floor, and therefore you've got now 3 walls. Rabbi says, "Sula, we do not say such a thing. We don't hold such a halacha." What happens if you've just got 2 walls? And what happens is you've got a balcony coming off. We should say the walls of the balcony should then go down because of Pitikah Yod V'Sosim. If it's a throughway sukkah, since everybody can walk through, there I don't hold the Pitikah Yod V'Sosim. And since I don't hold the Pitikah Yod V'Sosim, so therefore it is possible. When do we say it's kosher? Is only when you've at least got 3 walls of Pitikah Yod V'Sosim. But by 2 walls, since everybody can just walk through, we don't say the swell Pitikah Yod V'Sosim because everybody goes through it. Says They're arguing the same machlekes as Rav and Shmuel, which we had actually in Eruvin. The machlekes of Rav and Shmuel is regarding this particular place. This particular, like a chuppah canopy, 4 posts and a roof on top. Now the question is one allowed to carry underneath that canopy? That's the machlekes over here. That means according to, let's see more inside, the Itmel, a canopy in a valley. You're allowed to carry anywhere underneath it. The roof goes down the tefach, so we imagine as if it's got 4 walls. It's can only carry within 4 amos because it's considered to be within it's open area without walls. So you're allowed to carry 4 amos. So we see the same achlekas, Abaya and Rava regarding a kosher sukkah. In the Svar, particularly the V'Sosim, is Lachrikas about Rav and Shmuel regarding carrying in a bikkur. So most of that limit is Shmuel Kamalei Pligi. According to Shmuel, everybody agrees that he holds that it would not be a kosher sukkah, because just like he holds not allowed to carry regarding Eruvin, it would be no kosher, not kosher for Gabi sukkah. Top of your testament, Aleph. He Pligi Alibad Rav. Lachrik is only according to Abba. Abaya Rav. Rabbi will say, look at Rav. Rav said you're allowed to carry. Is a vine that's considered the wall. I too hold is considered the wall. It's a kosher sukkah. The fences were made for the canopy. There's a very big difference between the posts around the chuppah, the canopy, and the posts underneath the balconies. The posts underneath the balconies were made to support the balconies. So therefore, what happens is, again, not just the post, the actual balcony itself is never made for the sukkah inside it. The balcony itself is made for the people who want to stand on the balcony. So therefore, people looking, when you're standing on the balcony, you do not look as if the balcony now is a wall for that which is inside it. Because the balcony is made to stand on top of it. It's not made for the out of it. Mashaken in the canopy, you've got a chuppah. People can imagine to themselves that this is a room around. Let's try and show in the pictures. Over here, when you've got people standing over here, they would say to themselves, yes, we're underneath, within the canopy, because they see the canopy, they see the walls of the tefach thickness of the canopy. They imagine as if it's going all the way down. Mashaken over here, when it comes to the chotzer, which has got balconies all around, the balconies are not made for the area within. Since it's not made for the area within, therefore you cannot say Pitikah Yod V'Sosim. It says, that if it's got more than 4 amos, says our Mishnah, it's no good. Why is it no good? Name according to Abai, Pitikah Yod V'Seisam. According to Abai, there should never be a problem of Zefin Akuma. As long as there's a tefach thickness, it should be okay. Where the wall and the schach are parallel to each other. They're on the same level. The idea of Pitikah Yod V'Seisam is that the end of the balcony has a thickness of a tefach. That thickness of a tefach we imagine as if it's a wall going down. But if you fill that whole thickness of a tefach with a schach, there is no tefach thickness of airspace. When Abai said it, it's talking about where you put the schach on top of the balcony. So then below the schach, you've still got a whole tefach of wall, and that goes down to the floor. But here where you put the schach on the same level as the tefach of the balcony, everybody would agree that that is not Pitikah Yod V'Seisam, and that would be no good. So the Gemara says like this. I just want to show you a picture. I don't know if you'll be able to see the picture so well. If you look over here very carefully, the end of the balcony has got schach literally parallel and adjacent to it. So you can't actually see the tefach of the Pitikah. If you look over here, look in this picture, there's a tefach thickness of the balcony underneath the schach. That tefach thickness goes down as Pitikah. Look at this picture again over here. Over here, you've made the schach adjacent to the end of the balcony if you've got no svar of Pitikah Yod V'Seisam. So that is what the Gemara says is the reason why Rav and Shmuel not necessarily are the same as Rabbi and Rav. And that's why you're going to arrive from our Mishnah. Now the Gemara gives a slightly different version of this previous argument. In the first version, we learned if there's posts, everybody agrees it's kosher. Why? Because of lavot. If there's no posts, Abaya holds it's kosher because of Pitikah Yod V'Seisam. And Rav holds it's not kosher. Why is it not kosher? Because he doesn't know the Pitikah Yod V'Seisam. Says the Gemara, that's how they learned it in Sur. But Budisa learned it differently. If you put on a fence, on a courtyard that has no post, divakur psula, everybody holds it's possible. Why? Because everybody holds we do not say Pitikah Yod V'Seisam. Yesh lo pitzim if there is post about makashelo because of lavot. We don't say lavot. And all the Rishonim say, how would Rabbi not say lavot? So now we've always said lavot. The answer is, according to this version of the Gemara, Rabbi holds you don't say lavot in a situation where the posts are not made for the outer. Here the posts were made for the inner. Since the posts were made for the inner, therefore we don't say lavot. The halacha is like the first lashon. And since the halacha is like the first lashon, the halacha is like this. If it's got posts and there's lavot, it's okay. If it's got no posts and you rely on Pitikah Yod V'Seisam, it's no good. Says the Gemara, Rashi found that Rashi of Kahana was making a sukkah on the courtyard without posts. But Rav we pass about Rav always passing like Rav. And Rav passes if there's no posts, it's possible. The Gemara gives two versions why it was kosher. Both versions are very similar. That really, Rav Ashi thought there was only 2 walls, but really there were 3 walls. The third wall was not so visible. That means either it was only visible on the outside of the sukkah, not on the inside of the sukkah, or it was only visible on the inside of the sukkah, not on the outside. That means either way there was a third wall which was not so visible. We had this in Eruvin, that sometimes you could have a wall which could only be seen from one side. Simple example is, imagine the Beis Yisroel Beis Medrash, and imagine you're standing far away from an HaKodesh. So then what happens is, you do not see that in fact, there's another wall, there's this noshim going towards the Beis Medrash. If you're standing further closer, let's say where the chazan's standing, then you can see that there's another wall. There's a wall going from across to cut off there's this noshim, so therefore you've actually got an extra wall there. Sometimes you can have a wall which can only be seen when you're standing in a certain position. And the Gemara over here explains that there was a third wall. Of course, wasn't relying on the 2 walls, which like the Gemara said that thought in the Havamim. He was relying on the third wall, but it could only be seen either on the inside or on the outside, and that's why Rashi never saw it. So the Gemara says, he showed him near b'fnim, you could sit on the inside, the shom b'chutz, on the outside you couldn't. In Nami near b'chutz, the shom b'fnim, you could sit on the inside, on the outside, and the inside you couldn't. The idman near b'chutz, shom b'fnim, nida mishum lechi, it's good enough as a post for lechi and ptzimin, and lech is as good as a post any day. Here the Gemara brings one picture, a very, very small picture where you can see that if you're standing inside the sukkah, you can't see the extra post, but if you're standing outside, you can. Alternatively, another picture of the same kind of idea, where the Gemara shows where you can't see the posts. Here, there's a sukkah, and what happens is when you're standing inside the sukkah, you can't see. So when you're standing inside the sukkah, you can see the post over there, but not when you're standing outside. Alternatively, we're talking about where if you're standing outside, you can see that post. If you look very carefully, you see the post sticking out, but from the inside, you can't. The pictures aren't brilliant, but the idea is clear that really there were three walls, but sometimes you can't always see the three walls. Since you can't always see the three walls, but the Beis, since they were there, it is kosher. So the Beis, the Gemara says that we don't rely on our buyer, we pass like Rabbi, that for a sukkah to be kosher, one has to have at least three walls. You can't rely on Pitikul Yod V'Soisa. Tana. I want to do a little bit more. I want to get to the Mishnah. I'll do a bit more because we'll see if we'll think. Tana, we've learned in the Beis. Psala Yitzna Sukkah. Psala, as we said before, is schach. Schach that comes out of a sukkah, nidon k'sukkah. It's as good as a sukkah. My psala Yitzna Sukkah. What does that mean? Oma ola kunima Yitzna Sukkah. We talk about where the schach comes out from the back of the sukkah. Fidbo Babinon Shalishat Fan. You see these three walls. As well, Bedeka, there's three walls. Babinon Echsha Sukkah, you need a kosher sukkah. Bedeka, there is. Babinon Zlos Babu B'Chamos, you need to have more shade than sun. Bedeka. Fidbo Yochi Ma'ile Mem. What's the chiddush? It's got everything kosher. It's got three walls. It's got kosher schach, and it's got more than shade. It was only made for the inside, not for the outside. We'll talk about the sukkah, which is in the shape. I want to show the picture because this is the only way to understand it with a good picture. It's like this. You talk about the sukkah where you made the sukkah in one direction, and then there's a sukkah behind. That means you intended to build a sukkah over here. There happens to be that on the other side, the back of the sukkah, there's three walls. Here's the middle wall, there's three walls, and there's chach covering it. So it means what happened was you built a sukkah, and this chach hangs back behind the sukkah a bit. And it happens to be that there's three walls there. So you might have thought that wasn't your intention. You never intended to build a sukkah there. Your sukkah was made for the inside. Kamash malon, that it is kosher. A bit like a capital letter H. If you imagine a capital letter H, and you're making schach for the inside, and what happens is, when the schach covers the entire sukkah, it would be kosher. So now the Gemara brings a few other answers. What is psala yitzim na sukkah, and when is it kosher? This was just one answer. We're talking about a sukkah where you've got it like it's like a ches, but one leg of the ches is long, one leg of the ches is short, and you put schach across the whole thing. And the halacha is it is kosher across wherever you put the schach. Why? Let's inside. There's no extra sukkah. The chiddush is that this is still kosher because at the end of the day, it is still kosher because at the end of the day, you've still got kosher sukkah. Here, if you look at the picture very carefully, this wall sticks out, this wall sticks in, so you're allowed to sit anywhere underneath where there's shade. Even though where you're standing over here underneath the shade, there's no three walls anymore, because you've only got one wall over here, one wall on the back, you haven't got this third wall's not coming out towards it. Since it's a continuation of the sukkah, it is kosher, and that is the chiddush according to Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef. It's got, most of it, it's got more shade than some. But a small part of the sukkah, there's more sun than shade. That you might thought that part should be possible, it's not. If you've got a very big sukkah, and most of it, if you look at the majority of the whole sukkah, it's mostly shade, mostly tzeil. But if you look at one area of the sukkah, you'll find that in that area, there's more sun than shade. It is kosher because we go after the majority of the sukkah, and this is a continuation of the sukkah, and it is kosher. We're talking about you got a small sukkah, and it's got a bit of schach pasuk, and that's the chiddush. Or my yotze to a sukkah, even though it's not part of the halachas sukkah. Why would you need to tell me such a chiddush? If already less than 2 tvachim is kosher, and we said there's always more possible than schach possible, kavachima schach possible. This is mitzvah, you can sleep underneath. This you can't sleep underneath it. That means if you've got a small sukkah with air gaps, you can't sleep underneath it. You can if it's less than 3 tvachim. Committed to stuff mitzvah, is there such a thing that you can use it to join it up to make the kosher sukkah, but it itself is not kosher? Well, it says, and indeed there is such a thing. Says the Gemara, top of your text of the Beis, just 2 more lines, we'll stop. Tita niruk. If you've got loose mud, you're chiach. The person to wasn't just loose, muddy, wet mud. A person is not yotzei tvila. But the halacha is you have to have 40 sa'ah for a mikvah. Let's say you've only got 39 sa'ah, and you added to it another sa'ah of muddy, of loose, wet mud, then the halacha is it's kosher. So here we have an example of something which on its own is possible, but if you use it to join it up with something else, it is kosher. So too regarding the air, even though in itself it is possible, we can use it to start the shiva tvachim to make it kosher. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll carry on. Any questions, again, you can contact me. Appreciate it. I know it's hard. Every day is different time and it's difficult, but this is the circumstances. Maybe